a guy poked his head into a bakery and asked the owner, "How long until I can get a freshly baked cake?" The owner, glancing at the busy shop, said, "About 2 hours." The guy left. A week later, the same guy popped in again and asked, "How long for a freshly baked cake today?" The owner looked around and replied, "About an hour and a half." The guy left again. The owner turned to his friend and said, "Hey Jack, do me a favor. Follow that guy and see where he goes. He always asks about the wait time, but never comes back." A short time later, Jack came back, laughing so hard he could barely stand. The owner, puzzled, asked, "So, where does he go when he leaves?" Jack looked up, wiped the tears from his eyes, and said, "To your house." 1. Linda decided to tie the knot with her longtime boyfriend, Roy. One evening, after the honeymoon, Linda was organizing her law books. Her husband was standing nearby, watching her. After a long period of silence, he finally speaks. "Linda, I've been thinking. Now that we're married, maybe it's time you quit lawyering. You spend so much time in the courtroom. You could probably get a good price for your books." Linda gets this horrified look on her face. Roy says, "Darling, what's wrong?" For a minute, there, you were beginning to sound like my ex-husband. "Ex-husband," he shouts, chagrined. "I didn't know you were married before. I wasn't." 2. A guy was admitted to the hospital, and he fell in love with the nurse. She used to take care of him and very nice to him, always checking up on him and giving him extra attention compared to other patients. Therefore, the guy thought that the nurse was into him as well. The guy was shy and couldn't ask the nurse out on date. But after he was discharged, he somehow managed to get the number of the nurse and messaged her, "Hi, I'm the patient you looked after. I've been thinking about it, and I think you've stolen my heart." The nurse didn't reply for 2 days, and the patient was sure that he won't be getting any reply from her. Then, out of the blue, she replied, "Whatever you are accusing me of is not true. We only took 1 kidney out." 3. My nagging wife died suddenly on a trip to Jerusalem. Funeral director, "Sir, it would cost about $45,000 if we send her home back to the States, or $500 if we bury her here in Jerusalem." Me, "Ship her home." Funeral director, "But sir, why don't you bury her here in the Holy Land, and you can save money?" Me, "A long time ago, a man was buried here, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. I can't take that chance." 4. 4 men are in the hospital waiting room because their wives are having babies. A nurse goes up to the first guy and says, "Congratulations, you're the father of twins." "That's odd," answers the man. "I work for the Minnesota Twins." A nurse says to the second guy, "Congratulations, you're the father of triplets." "That's weird," answers the second man. "I work for the 3M company." A nurse tells the third man, "Congratulations, you're the father of quadruplets." "That's strange," he answers. "I work for the 4 Seasons Hotel." The last man is groaning and banging his head against the wall. "What's wrong?" the others ask. "I work for 7-Up." 5. A man was driving down the road when a policeman stopped him. The officer looked in the back of the man's truck and said, "Why are these penguins in your truck?" The man replied, "These are my penguins. They belong to me." You need to take them to the zoo, the policeman said. The next day, the officer saw the same guy driving down the road. He pulled him over again. He saw the penguins were still in the truck, but they were wearing sunglasses this time. I thought I told you to take these penguins to the zoo, the officer said. I did, the man replied. And today, I'm taking them to the beach. 6. A New York attorney representing a wealthy art collector called his client and said to him, Saul, I have some good news, and I have some bad news. The art collector replied, I've had an awful day. Let's hear the good news first. The attorney said, Well, I met with your wife today, and she informed me that she invested $5,000 in 2 pictures that she thinks will bring a minimum of 15 to 20 million. I think she could be right. Saul replied enthusiastically, Well done. My wife is a brilliant businesswoman. You've just made my day. Now I know I can handle the bad news. What is it? The attorney replied, The pictures are of you with your secretary. 7. Once, a mosquito walked into a clinic. The doctor saw him and asked him what the matter was. The mosquito said that he had a lot of problems. He was not happy with his life. He was not happy with the job he was doing. He was sad and had no motivation. The doctor listened to his problems and told him that he should really visit a therapist instead of a doctor. The mosquito replied, Yeah, I know. I just came in because of the blood. 8. I was once passing through a town in England when this lady stopped me because she needed help fixing her car that had broken down. As I was fixing the car, the lady would cross the road and shout, "Hello!" at me. This happened a few times, as the lady found it really amusing. I would have thought that it was very weird had I not realized that it was the singer Adele. 9. A blonde goes into work one morning, crying her eyes out. Her boss, concerned about his employees' well-being, asks sympathetically, "What's the matter?" The blonde replies, "Early this morning, I got a phone call saying that my mother had passed away." "I'm terribly sorry to hear that. Why don't you go home for the day?" "We aren't terribly busy. Just take the day off to relax and rest." The blonde very calmly explains, "No, I'd be better off here. I need to keep my mind off it, and I have the best chance of doing that here." The boss agrees and allows the blonde to work as usual. "If you need anything, just let me know," he says. A few hours pass, and the boss decides to check on the blonde. He looks out over his office and sees the blonde crying hysterically. He rushes out to her and asks, "Are you going to be okay? Is there anything I can do to help?" "No," replies the blonde. "I just got a call from my sister, and she said that her mom died too." 10. A blonde, wanting to earn some money, decided to hire herself out as a handyman type and started canvassing a wealthy neighborhood. She went to the front door of the first house and asked the owner if he had any jobs for her to do. "Well, you can paint my porch. How much will you charge?" The blonde said, "How about $50? The man agreed and told her that the paint and other materials that she might need were in the garage. The man's wife, inside the house, heard the conversation and said to her husband, "Does she realize that the porch goes all the way around the house?" The man replied, "She should. She was standing on it." A short time later, the blonde came to the door to collect her money. "You're finished already?" he asked. "Yes," the blonde answered, "and I had paint left over, so I gave it 2 coats." Impressed, the man reached in his pocket for the $50. "And by the way," the blonde added, "it's not a Porsche, it's a Ferrari." 11. One day, 3 women went to the top of a water flume in a swimming pool. There was a black-haired, brown-haired, and a blonde-haired woman. When they got to the top, a genie appeared from nowhere and said, "When you're going down the flume, shout out the thing that you want, and you will land in it at the bottom." So the black-haired woman went down and shouted "money" and landed in a load of cash. The brown-haired woman went down and shouted "gorgeous men" and landed in a pile of men. The blonde woman wasn't listening to the genie, so she went down shouting "wee." 12. A blonde went to electronics store and she asked, "How much is this TV?" The salesman said, "Sorry, we don't sell to blondes." The next day she came back as a brunette. She asked the salesman how much the TV was. He said, "Sorry, we don't sell to blondes." The next day she came back as a redhead and asked the salesman how much the TV was. He said, "Sorry, we don't sell to blondes." She replied, "I came in here as a brunette and a redhead. How do you know I am a blonde?" "Because that is not a TV, it's a microwave." 13. A man and woman were on their honeymoon after a long and very happy courtship. On their honeymoon, they decide to take their horses through the beautiful mountain passes of Europe. As the horses were crossing a small stream, the woman's horse missteps and jostles the man's wife. Once across the stream, the man dismounts, walks over to the horse, and stares into its eyes. Finally, he states, "That's one." The man remounts his horse, and they continue their ride. A bit further down the path, the woman's horse stumbles when stepping over a fallen tree. The man dismounts, stares the horse in the eyes, and boldly states, "That's 2." He returns to his saddle, and they move on. As the afternoon sun began to set, the woman's horse once again lost its footing on a mossy slope. The man dismounts, moves to the woman's horse, and helps his wife out of the saddle, the man. Moving to the front of the horse, he stares it in the eyes and firmly says, "That's 3," removes a pistol from his vest, and shots the horse dead. The woman, quite upset at seeing the beautiful horse killed, says to her husband, "That's terrible. Why would you do such a thing?" The man stares at his wife and firmly says, "That's 1." 14. A monster went to the doctor with a branch growing out of his head. Said the doctor. "I've no idea what it is." The next week, the branch was covered in leaves and blossom. "I'm stumped," said the doctor, "but you can try taking these pills." When the monster came back a month later, the branch had grown into a tree, and just a few weeks later, he developed a small pond. surrounded by trees and bushes, all of them on top of his head. "Ah," said the doctor, "I know what it is. You've got a beauty spot." 15. Anxious for his first investigation, he was a bit perturbed when he was assigned to audit a rabbi. Looking over the books and taxes was pretty straightforward, and the rabbi was clearly very frugal, so he thought he'd make his day interesting by having a little fun with the rabbi. "Rabbi," he said, "I noticed that you buy a lot of candles." "Yes," answered the rabbi. "Well, Rabbi, what do you do with the candle drippings?" he asked. "A good question," noted the rabbi. "We actually save them up, and when we have enough, we send them back to the candle maker. And every now and then, they send us a free box of candles." "Oh," replied the auditor, somewhat disappointed that his unusual question actually had a practical answer. So he thought he'd go on in the traditional obnoxious way. "Rabbi, what about all these cookie purchases? What do you do with the crumbs from the cookies?" "Ah, yes," replied the rabbi calmly. "We actually collect up all the crumbs from the cookies, and when we have enough, we send them in a box back to the manufacturer. Every now and then, they send a box of cookies." "Oh," replied the auditor, thinking hard how to fluster the rabbi. "Well, Rabbi," he went on, "what do you do with all the foreskins from the circumcisions?" "Yes, here too, we do not waste," answered the rabbi. "What we do is save up all the foreskins, and when we have enough, we actually send them to the IRS." "The IRS?" asked the auditor in disbelief. "Ah, yes," replied the rabbi. "The IRS, and about once a year, they send us a little like you." 16. A young ventriloquist is touring the clubs, and one night he's doing a show in a small club in a small town in Arkansas. With his dummy on his knee, he's going through his usual dumb blonde jokes when a blonde woman in the fourth row stands on her chair and starts shouting, "I've heard enough of your stupid blonde jokes. What makes you think you can stereotype women that way? What does the color of a person's hair have to do with her worth as a human being? It's guys like you who keep women like me from being respected at work and in the community and from reaching our full potential as a person, because you and your kind continue to perpetuate discrimination against not only blondes, but women in general, and all in the name of humor." The ventriloquist is embarrassed and begins to apologize when the blonde yells, "You stay out of this, mister! I'm talking to that little idiot on your knee!" 17. A blonde decides to learn and try horseback riding unassisted without prior experience or lessons. She mounts the horse with great effort, and the tall, shiny horse springs into motion. It gallops along at a steady and rhythmic pace, but the blonde begins to slip from the saddle. Out of sheer terror, she grabs for the horse's mane, but cannot seem to get a firm grip. She tries to throw her arms around the horse's neck, but she slides down the side of the horse anyway. The horse gallops along, seemingly oblivious to its slipping rider. Finally, giving up her frail grip, she leaps away from the horse to try and throw herself to safety. Unfortunately, her foot has become entangled in the stirrup. She is now at the mercy of the horse's pounding hooves, as her head is struck against the ground again and again. As her head is battered against the ground, she is mere moments away from unconsciousness or even death, when Frank, the Walmart manager, runs out to shut the horse off. 18. A little old lady tried to phone her local bank, but was put through instead to the bank call center. "Is that the High Street branch?" she asked. "No, madam," replied the voice at the other end. "It is now company policy to deal with telephone calls centrally." "Well, I really need to speak to the branch," said the old lady. "Madam, if you just let me know your query, I'm sure I can help you." "I don't think you can, young man. I need to speak to the branch." The call center operator was adamant. "There's nothing that the branch can help you with that can't be dealt with by me." "Very well then," sighed the old lady. "Can you just check on the counter? Did I leave my gloves behind when I came in this morning?" 19. A father put his 3-year-old daughter to bed, told her a story, and listened to her prayers, which she ended by saying, "God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, God bless Grandma, and goodbye, Grandpa." The father asked, "Why did you say goodbye, Grandpa?" The little girl said, "I don't know, Daddy. It just seemed like the thing to do." The next day, Grandpa died. The father thought it was a strange coincidence. A few months later, the father put the girl to bed and listened to her prayers, which went like this: "God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, and goodbye, Grandma." The next day, the grandmother died. "Oh my gosh," thought the father. "This kid is in contact with the other side." Several weeks later, when the girl was going to bed, the dad heard her say, "God bless Mommy and goodbye, Daddy." He practically went into shock. He couldn't sleep all night and got up at the crack of dawn to go to his office. He was nervous as a cat all day, had lunch sent in, and watched the clock. He figured if he could get by until midnight, he would be okay. He felt safe in the office, so instead of going home at the end of the day, he stayed there, drinking coffee, looking at his watch, and jumping at every sound. Finally, midnight arrived. He breathed a sigh of relief and went home. When he got home, his wife said, "I've never seen you work so late. What's the matter?" He said, "I don't want to talk about it. I've just spent the worst day of my life." She said, "You think you had a bad day? You'll never believe what happened to me. This morning, the milkman dropped dead on our porch. Husband and his wife are having a fight." 20. One day, 3 pigs were having a great time at the park, blowing bubbles. A police officer spotted them and handed out a ticket. They were ordered to appear in court. The first pig waddled into the courtroom, and the judge asked, "What's your name and why are you here?" The pig replied, "My name is Oink, and I got in trouble for blowing bubbles in the park." The judge raised an eyebrow and said, "That's not a crime. You're free to go. Please send in the next pig." The second pig came in, and the judge repeated, "What's your name, and why are you here?" This pig said, My name is Oink Oink, and I'm here for blowing bubbles in the park." The judge chuckled and said, "That's not a crime either. You can go now. Send in the last pig." The third pig walked in, and the judge smiled. "Let me guess. Your name is Oink Oink Oink, and you're here for blowing bubbles in the park." The pig shook its head and said, "Nope, my name is Bubbles." 21. After being deployed overseas for over a year, a soldier finally returns home to his wife. But that first night back, something unexpected happens. His wife suddenly becomes really sick, clutching her stomach, looking pale and weak. The soldier, always quick to act under pressure, rushes her to the doctor in the middle of the night. They arrive at the clinic, and the doctor takes his wife into an examination room while the soldier waits nervously in the waiting area. A few minutes later, the doctor comes out, looking calm but serious, and asks, "Can I speak to you in private?" The soldier follows him into an office, his heart pounding, bracing himself for some bad news. The doctor closes the door behind them and turns to the soldier with a grave look. "Your wife is pregnant." The soldier's eyes widen in shock. His mouth opens, but no words come out at first. He finally manages to stammer, "Pregnant? But how is that possible? I've been overseas for over a year." The doctor sighs and gives him a knowing look. This is what we call a grudge pregnancy. The soldier furrows his brow, completely confused. A grudge pregnancy? What does that even mean? The doctor leans back in his chair and says, "Well, someone must have had it in for you." 22. A first-grade teacher was having trouble with one of her students who was being extremely rude in class. So one day, she asked little Johnny what his problem was. He replied, "I'm too smart for the first grade. My sister is in the third grade, and I'm smarter than her too." The teacher took him to the principal's office and explained the situation to the principal. The principal told her that he would give Johnny a test, and if he failed to answer one question correctly, he would have to go back to the first grade and be quiet. The teacher and Johnny both agreed. The principal asked, "What's 3x3? Johnny replied, 9. "6x6? Asked the principal. 36, Johnny quickly replied. It continued on like this for almost an hour. The principal asked Johnny every question a third grader should know, and he answered them all correctly. Finally, the principal told the teacher, "I see no reason Johnny can't go to the third grade. He answered all of my questions right." The teacher asked if she could ask him some questions. The principal and Johnny agree. So, the teacher asks Johnny, "What does a cow have 4 of that I only have 2 of?" "Legs," Johnny replies. The teacher then asks, "What do you have in your pants that I don't have?" The principal gasps, but before he can stop him from answering, Johnny says, "Pockets." Then the teacher asks, "What does a dog do that a man steps into?" Johnny says, "Pants." Finally, the teacher asks, "What starts with F, ends with K, and means a lot of excitement. "Fire truck," says Johnny. The principal breathes a big sigh of relief, then says, "Put Johnny in the 5th grade." I got the last 4 questions wrong myself.